Hey guys, hope you're all keeping well. Enjoying the start of June, or at least getting some decent weather. God knows I'm getting too much warm weather. My body still can't regulate the heat because of the chemotherapy, but it has left me time to work on some new video ideas. This is actually one I've been wanting to do for a while. I started the idea back in December, just before I got the diagnosis. So it's nice to come back to it, and after watching Across the Spider-Verse, I thought to myself, let's have another crack at this. So this is my pitch for the 4th Spider-Man film in the MCU, Sony Universe. Ugh, dirty word saying Sony. So sit back and enjoy, and we're going to our villains first. So as always, grab a drink and get yourself comfortable, and then let's have a look at this. So, right off the bat, bring back some familiar faces. No, again. Right off the bat, bring back some familiar faces in the Tinker and Scorpion with Michael Chernos and Michael Mando respectively. If you see me looking down, I have my notes. I'm sorry. So Michael Chernos and Michael Mando respectively. Chernos played the Tinker, who was the tech guy for the Vulture, and Mando briefly appeared as Mac Gargan, who is the secret identity of the Scorpion. He's the one that gets arrested on the ferry. You'll probably recognize him from loads of things. Both fantastic actors, but Mando in particular, a lot of us sort of nerdy people will know him as the villain in Far Cry 3. And holy good God, he is terrifying in that. He has this unhinged, off-the-wall energy that makes him just scary. And I would love to see him bring that to the Scorpion.
Okay? You have a fucking problem in your head. Do you think I'm bullshitting you? Do you think I'm lying? Fuck you!
And let's get my notes here. I would say, let's keep we've established Peter as a character. We have him as his own. Kick the film off with a fight against the Shocker. Because we know there's Shockers in the universes, in the MC universe, sorry. And have Peter think he's going to win that one, and all of a sudden reveal the Scorpion and have Peter lose right at the start of the film. It would be just a really good way to kick this thing off. Just picture that, your main character losing in the first 15-20 minutes of the film, and then still having to go back out there for the rest of the runtime to try and fight this guy. Maybe to lose 2, 3, 4 times against him. No, it's 2 or 3 times before inevitably at the end of the film getting to fight and defeat the villain. And again, Mando would be perfect at this. Like, you saw him in the first Spider-Man Homecoming. He is intense. Like, oh, and he's barely in it. And they would make use of the two characters already there. Also 3 if you count the Shocker, because we could have a new one, or we could use the one that we were left with at the end of that villain. And it would just work so well. It's hard to really describe this, because I don't want to see the MCU bring in new people. Well, new villains. When you have these ones sitting there just ready to be used, I feel like their issue is they kill off people too much, or they just bring in new guys over and over again instead of using what's already there and established. So this is my pitch for them, and I just think that is the perfect way to go with this. Again, if I'm wrong, comment below and explain why, or what else there is. But we've got more to do here, so we'll have we talk about origin for the Scorpion now. So, origin's going to have to change here, but we know that. In the original comics, and there's probably variations of this, but I always remember that he was a private investigator hired by J. Jonah Jameson to follow Peter Parker to find out how he was getting pictures of Spider-Man. This is before Jameson sort of mellowed out and started to generally like Peter. So Peter ends up humiliating him. Jameson brings him to a geneticist that he's funding for some reason. I don't know, it doesn't make any sense if you look at these days. And they turn him into the Scorpion. And he kind of goes a bit crazy. And he was a great foil for Peter, because where Peter was a genius who was accidentally bitten by the spider. This guy is kind of an underachiever who is forcibly transformed with the Scorpion. So, how can we make this work? Well, yeah, we can definitely make it work. We could say that Mac Gargan gets out of prison on a technicality and becomes like the poster boy for the Daily Bugle. Because we know in this universe that J. Jonah Jameson still hates Spider-Man.
He stole my suit! He's a menace to the entire city!
He's a menace, we know he is. So, they become friendly. Jameson being a bit more unhinged, he's playing the Alex Jones type. Maybe does know some disgraced scientist that is doing work on the Daily Bugle, podcast show, wherever it is, and puts them in touch. This guy uses his resources to transform Mac Gargan into the Scorpion, who has also become friends with other people in prison, Shocker and Tinker, and uses them in his gang, specifically Tinker, to build him a suit. Maybe in the first encounter he doesn't have all the tech that he eventually gets, so that works for Marvel. He gives them ways to build him up and give him different things to sell, because they love merchandise. And that just, it gives us a cool character, as long as they don't deviate too much. Because then you run, what I always worry about is with they build these tacky suits, is they do the Michael Bay Transformers route and make it too unwieldy and looks a bit stupid. You want to try and keep it streamlined and cool. It's finding that balance. But the MCU, they don't tend to mess up on these things too much. What I would also say as well is we need to have the Tinker in it too, because I kind of liked what they did with that character in the Miles Morales Spider-Man game, and you could have Mac Gargan eventually kill off this Tinkerer, or maybe this Tinkerer to die in some sort of accident caused by Spider-Man that would result in someone else taking over his role and becoming a new Tinkerer to terrorize New York City later on down the line. And we'll talk about that in future installments of the series. But that's sort of my pitch for an origin for this Scorpion. So now we'll move on to who else we're going to introduce, because obviously we can't just have a Spider-Man film with just Peter and these guys, because as much it is Spider-Man, he works best as an ensemble. So we'll get to that next. So let's move on to friends and allies. Don't hate me, but I don't want to see Ned or MJ back just yet. I think Sony are going to rush it, and it won't mean anything when this reunion happens. I would rather have a trilogy of films where they are not going to appear to the end, and I give an idea of how I'd like to see it. So, no Ned, no MJ. Which sucks, because I did love both those characters, and they were actually some of the best parts about the most recent Spider-Man trilogy. So I'd be sad not seeing them back, but I feel like the not seeing them until the 6th film in this little trilogy I'm thinking of is probably what's best. But what we could use is new friends. So first of all, with Aunt May unfortunately gone, you would need someone else to step in and take over the charity she was running. The character of Martin Lee would be the perfect person for that role. He also has the alternate personality of Mr. Negative, so by day he is running charities and doing these wonderful nice things for New York, and by night he is a supervillain who would look really just cool on the big screen. Now, originally, I don't think they were aware of each other, if that makes any sense. That they're two distinct personalities, but I think that's been changed now. So we'll get to that later. I would prefer it if they were separate to a point, and eventually things start to converge and they become aware of each other. I just think there's a lot that could be done there with that. Who else I'd love to see in it? Well, either or both Cindy Moon, who's kind of appeared already, and Miles Morales. So we'll get to Miles first, because most of you will be aware of who Miles is. He is the second big Spider-Man. Also Kid Arachnid, which is not a bad, nickname or superhero name, but I like the fact they've just both gone with Spider-Man. He has all the Peter's powers, plus a little bit more, though his spider sense is weaker than Peter's. He does have like bioelectricity, which is pretty awesome. And as a mixed race guy of African American and Puerto Rican, I believe, heritage, definitely great to have, because that is something which isn't touched on by the MCU too much. In that, you know, I can't think of many characters who are, you know, anyone who's really like mixed out there, which it's nice for representation. And I know some people roll their eyes at that, but you know, it gives you a different perspective, and that's where representation done right comes out best. You know, giving us new perspectives and things that we don't normally see. Not when it's just forced in there to, you know, tick a box, because that to me is more damaging than actually, you know, because that pushes more people away. Though, to be fair, this is going to get butts in seats anywhere. And I think representation is important, but representation done right is even more important. So I'm starting to get off topic. Great character, should be introduced. Plus you could use, you know, his supporting cast are great as well. Then there's Cindy Moon, who is the character of Silk. She is another spider person. She kind of has already appeared in the MCU, but it was more of just a placeholder character that they give her name to. Young Asian American woman, again with all the Peter's powers. You could introduce both, and we could see which one's most popular, but personally, it would be a bigger risk and better payoff if somehow you introduce both and eventually let them both becoming spider persons. Because, again, at the end of this little trilogy in my head, I would always picture Peter retiring or going off to be Peter, because he's lost his parents, he's lost Uncle Ben, he lost Tony Stark, he lost Aunt May, and he's lost his best friends. He's lost actually Peter Parker as well. So using this trilogy to have him find replacements for Spider-Man so he could go off and be Peter Parker, I think is just the best way to go. And yes, someone may counter with, well, why do we need 2 replacements for Spider-Man? Well, Spider-Man at the start of the MCU, back in phase 2, phase 3, so, I think that was phase 2. You know, wherever Captain America Civil War was, things weren't that crazy. That was pre-snap, pre-giant creature, you know, coming out of the ocean in Eternals, pre-She-Hulk lawyer, pre-Doctor Strange breaking the multiverse, pre-Asgardians moving to Earth, pre-alien invasion at one point. In fact, 2 alien invasions now, if you think about the Invasion series coming out. New York was a lot simpler back then, so maybe having 1 Spider-Man was enough, but maybe coming into a world now where 2 spider persons are needed is better, and that's why I would like to see both of them introduced in different ways. Also, because you would feature this charitable organization, nice to see a little cameo from Matt Murdock again, because, I don't know, Charlie Cox was great in the role and we want more of it. And, you know, representation for those guilt-driven Catholic boys like myself out there. Can't believe I said that. But yeah, I really liked him for it anyway. So right now, I guess all we have to do is move on to like the elevator pitch of how I see this film going. So again, time for another quick drink, and we'll move on to our next bit. So the elevator pitch. Begin the film, 4 credits roll, Peter versus Shocker. Peter easily winning, being playful about it, kind of enjoying his time as Spider-Man, because his time as Peter Parker's not so good. Then gets ambushed by the Scorpion. They beat him, but enough where he just runs away, where he's prevented whatever crime they were trying to commit. He's not injured, but he has a bruised ego. Goes to the charity where Aunt May used to work. Now it's being run by Martin Lee. He's working there to honor her memory and stay close to something from her. We know he's the kind of guy that does this because of his relationship with Uncle Ben. We know that he is Spider-Man because he wants to honor Uncle Ben's memory. So I think him still being Spider-Man and working at Feast, or well, it was Feast in games and other things, or whatever she calls it, honors both his aunt and uncle, who were his parental figures for most of his life. We would then see him get an alert on some other crime happening out there. He eventually go out, fights this crime. It's another trap from the Scorpion. He takes a bit of a beating this time and retreats back to this charity room. It's nearest place nearby, where he has a backup suit and some medical gear to heal himself up. Gets caught by Miles and or Cindy, preferably both, I think. And then unfortunately he miscalculates and he's being tracked there by this gang with Tinker, Scorpion, Shocker and a bunch of random thugs. Now, at the same time, at this charity you'll find all our characters are there, including the cameo by Matt Murdock. So when Peter goes to try and confront these people himself, Miles and Cindy and a few other of the staff members get everyone there they can to safety, hidden away somewhere where they won't get hurt. Peter goes to confront them by himself, the villains, where he's backed up by a timely surprise visit from Daredevil. Daredevil fights Shocker. Peter goes up against Scorpion. Meanwhile, other thugs rush into the buildings. We'll say either Miles or Cindy get injured. That will come into play later on. I'm going to go with Cindy probably, for reasons to get into a second. But we'll have them be capable enough to have done something, Meanwhile, it's teased to us that Martin Lee is more than he appears. And say he gets cornered by a group of thugs and we see them about to attack him. And then maybe zooms in his eyes, you see like a weird shift into the eyes of Mr. Negative, but that's all we see. And it cuts back to the main fight, and later on in the film we'll find out that Martin escaped unscathed and nothing else is ever said about those guys. Just a tease for later on. Daredevil beats Shocker and Peter beats the Scorpion. We'll say Cindy's injured. It could be Miles, but maybe revealing that she needs a blood transfusion. No one there has her blood type. Peter has her blood type, transfers some of his blood. This causes a mutation in her. We'll maybe reveal reasons that why she would maybe be more effective than some people later. I'm not too sure, but that's kind of how I picture it. And it would end on a note where Peter now has two new people he can trust. Miles maybe being his guy in the chair for the next film, and Cindy being someone that he can rely on. A couple of things, there will be a male-female friendship, by the way, that is just a platonic friendship. I think that is something that he gets overlooked a lot. Miyazaki from Studio Ghibli has mentioned this before, and I think it's a really important thing, that just because a man and woman are on screen, maybe them in equal roles, they don't need to be in a relationship. I know the MCU has had that in some cases, but it's not really a front and center thing, so it'd be nice for at least 2 films to have that. And of course Miles eventually will become a Spider-Man, or maybe have Peter as Spider-Man for now, and Cindy take on the role of Silk, and at the end of this, when Peter stops being Spider-Man, Miles can become Spider-Man, and then we can eventually move on to Spider-Man and Silk later on down the line. So that's how I see that. It makes use of a great villain in Scorpion. It sets up a future Tinkerer villain, because again, if you haven't played the Sony Miles Morales expansion for the Spider-Man game, I'll talk about that in a future one, why I actually really like their take on the Tinkerer. Usually I feel like, well, they do a race gender swap and they make a pretty mad villain into a really compelling villain. And usually I feel like doing a race gender swap thing can be a little bit cheap as a way to shoehorn in something that isn't maybe as good as an original character, but this kind of worked really, I think this did work really well. But yeah, other things I would do, ditch the, you've got Homecoming, Far From Home, and No Way Home, ditch that. Is this a new trilogy? Doesn't need that. You don't have to call it 4, 5, and 6, but give it different names. or something like that. Bring back a soundtrack as well. The Sam Raimi films had amazing soundtracks. We could bring those sort of things back. I know I'm not the only one out there who absolutely love them, but yeah, that's kind of my pitch for these. Just it brings Peter back to basics, because we've seen him in space, we've seen him fight aliens, we've seen him be a spy, we've seen him tour the world, but we have very little time seeing him being a friendly neighborhood Spider-Man. This will have him have to use his basic powers and his wits and his intelligence and some help from friends to fight on the streets of New York against New York level threats. Sorry, I don't have no pronunciation there. And I think that's what we need, and we can use this trilogy to have Peter find out who Peter is, because he knows who Spider-Man is. The world didn't lose Spider-Man, it lost Peter Parker. He lost everything, and I couldn't fathom that. His mom, dad, aunt, uncle, his best friend, his mentor, the one person he loves. He even gave up his first attempt at romance to be Spider-Man. So we could use this, these films to have him find himself again, and eventually I would like to see him end up at Boston, MIT, with with Ned and MJ eventually, and I'd like that to be fixed. I think that's just a really important thing to do, but that's why you need time for this. We need some time for Peter to find out who Peter is. So, there's my pitch for it. So, another week and we'll have some more stuff out, but until then, it's summer. Go out, get some fresh air, enjoy yourselves, and we'll see you next week, guys. I'm going to finish this tea, and I'm going to finish editing this video, and we'll get it posted. But thanks for watching, and yeah, just please subscribe, comment, like below. See you next week, guys.